WorldFM Day celebration. This is our fourth webinar, our series of 6 webinars planned to celebrate World FM Day. And today is Progress in Evidence-Based Workplace Management by Wim. Okay, next slide, please. Everyone has been muted for audio quality. Please make sure to type your questions into the chat box, and we'll go over them during the Q&A portion of the webinar at the end. Next slide, please. We do want to let you know the FMCC provides many services to the FM community, such as Ask the Expert, Find a Consultant, Locate a Speaker, and online educational resources. You may find more information at their website, fmcc.ifma.org. Next slide, please. And I'm your moderator, Joshua Amos, and again, Wim Pullen is our presenter today. Next slide. And there's just some logistics for you. And you can get the recording from the FMCC website. And again, that's fmcc.ifma.org. Next slide, please. And I do want to take this time to thank our sponsors of these webinars. And next slide. Great, okay. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenter, Wim Pullen.
Good day, everyone. Josh and I were just chatting before we got live to you about whether World FM Day is a big thing in the different countries, and I learned that in some countries it's a big thing. In the Netherlands we are progressing with that, and so I hope to see that the attention for this discipline will increase, and that we can celebrate the progress in service to end-user customers and your clients. And I'm going to share with you some of the work we've been doing here in the Netherlands in the last 15 years, which is on what we call evidence-based workplace management. The movement of evidence-based disciplines started actually with evidence-based medicine. You know, you go to your doctor and they're listening to you, and at the same time they're typing stuff in their computer, using all those keywords to find out what type of disease you have and to get their diagnosis right, and be supported by all kind of evidence that is provided to them in databases, etc. But in the world of workplaces and workplace management or facilities management, we have a history of experience-based working instead of evidence-based working. Well, management questions from top management are very often based on can you provide me with some proof of, etc. So what I want to share with you is how we think about it as related to developments in evidence-based medicine, evidence-based management, evidence-based organizational psychology, or whatever you can apply to any discipline. My second idea was to share with you some ideas about the big questions that we face when we talk to managers in organizations, as related to FM issues, to workplace issues, to corporate real estate issues, etc. And of course an hour is too short to share with you the state of the art of workplace research, but at least I can give you some ideas of what we are reaching here in the Netherlands. I have a background in can imagine geodetic engineering, which is land surveying from Delft University, but I got pretty much lost from that track in my early career because I started with physical things. I worked with the Dutch government buildings agency, and I left there in early 2000 to join, actually to start the Center for People and Buildings, which is a, as you can read with me, a not-for-profit research and educational knowledge center. We are not part of the university, which is in this case Delft University of Technology, but we are an independent kind of not-for-profit center, and I've been now in this field for about 30 years, and the reason to start with the Center for People and Buildings was that in the early days of what we now call new ways of working, there were many stories but very few facts actually. People were telling at parties their stories about their experiences with this in the early 90s already. We've been progressing and pretty much liberal in the Netherlands with workplace issues, very much for individual employees to find out, or for forward-thinking companies to think about and to experiment with all kind of workplace concepts. So getting away from just those stories, which are from an anthropological point of view very interesting, but from a management perspective not very helpful to base decisions on, for instance. So that's kind of my background and the reason why we try to dig in this issue of evidence-based workplace management. So when we meet with the top management in organizations, either CEOs or CFOs, we always try to listen very carefully with them. And what strikes me again and again is that those two underlined words in this slide keep coming back. I remember one day a guy bending over to me said something like, "It would be wonderful if we can predict whether a new workplace concept for my knowledge workers contributes to the growth of their labor productivity." So my counter question was, why do you think it is wonderful to predict that? And then he lowered his voice and bent over to me and said, "Then I can confront them with the figures and the facts and figures, so that they have to raise their labor productivity." Well, very curious, of course, but that didn't withhold them from experimenting with new workplace concepts and finding ways of working that support knowledge workers in a more, I would say, productive manner, a more responsible manner, based on their individual capacities. But in large organizations, government organizations, or large, more bureaucratic industries, we find that there is also another type of question based on decisions top-down from the boardroom. People want to cut costs and getting new work environments in place, usually with less square meters, to cut costs. And then they say, how do we get people to accept what we want? Because usually we don't support them with less square meters, less filing storage space. We have to squeeze them in. So how can we prove that the implementation process and time and attention for such concepts can be done without too much time being lost at gossiping the disadvantages of those new work environments, which is kind of an unproductive time, of course. So these are two elements that we took seriously in trying to find out whether we can answer those questions. Can we predict positive advantages from new workplace concepts, or can we support management in their implementation processes? So to illustrate that, I just give you some examples. So imagine this is you are probably, this might be an academic guy with all his materials of a lifetime of study in his room. daylight doesn't seem to be there, but he might be very happy with all his book and stuff around him. But this guy is being confronted with decisions from top management in his organization. Remember, he's been in his room for maybe 15, 20, 25 years already, collecting all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, just from a financial perspective, top management decides to go for a design which holds non-assigned offices, more transparency, more open, more meeting spaces, etc. So imagine this is his new future workplace. You really can think about what his reaction is. This is a very bad decision in his opinion, because how does he, in this new probably fancy designed workplace environment, how does he connect it to his past, his memory actually, which is behind him in this picture, in all his books and reports and documents. So resistance is born already. So if you are deciding on new workplace concepts, this type of issue with the people raises questions like, what's the average age of the workforce, and do people respond all the same like this guy, maybe in his late 50s, and do people like these type of solutions? Can they cope with the loss of access to their backup materials in their own libraries? This type of question raises really the question whether the consequences of things like the increasing retirement ages to 70 years, we're close to 67 now here in the Netherlands, and what are the consequences of those developments as compared to the HR issues? And if people are facing the challenge to cope with new workplace designs, then what's their reference? Is their reference a room for themselves, an assigned workstation in an open space, or what's their picture? Where do they come from? So how do managers cope with the resistance? Do they neglect it, or do they support people saying, yes, it's true, and maybe we can use the office concept to introduce a certain part of your time working from home or from other options where you can do your work, where you can concentrate and you are supported instead of that you're facing troubles. And very much important is which type of answers are in your business case. So if you have to provide materials to get a decision taken, what type of future perspective or actual perspective when it comes to reactions of people do you put in your business case? Very often we see a thorough neglect of the issue of the workplace reference. Where do people come from? Where do they go to? And what amount of resistance will we see? And what time is spent on, saying something like this is not going to work for us. And people are joining in employee committees and creating resistance, organized resistance, etc. We see that that very much in business cases. So imagine a young guy, not the old guy in his late 50s, but a young guy doing his first job interview, thinking about his future, thinking about what is it going to be when he is being granted the job that he's applying for, not knowing that this will be his work environment, because the company that he's talking to get the job just holds this type of work environment, which is a kind of well, it's even less than neutral. It's an anonymous work environment, and you are somebody in a certain place. While his type of life is social media, being on the bike, using his smartphone, being connected to all kind of friends through social media, and he would be being put in such a orange kind of cubicle, which is even more than anonymous as compared to his daily work life and life issues. So the question that he might raise is, what will the outcome be for me if I connect myself to this company, become an anonymous HR number, while I have a lot of friends on all those social media. So the type of developments that we face, and when we introduce this evidence-based workplace management, we of course have to explain what we are talking about. So evidence-based for us means something like preventing bad decisions, not taking into account, leaving out all kind of relevant issues. We want to support clear views on outcomes, and to provide complete, as much as possible, and reliable business cases. So these are the three things that we're facing as reducing risks, creating transparency, and reliability in decision making. The scope of this webinar is very much on the first dot on this slide, officers and knowledge workers. I could have spent another webinar on schools, educational institutions, universities, hospitals or nursing homes, and what's happening there. And even more in depth, looking at what the work environment of farmers, construction workers, firefighters, miners, soldiers, and manufacturing workers could be. But we have to limit ourselves in time. And even though, as you remember, Rana Plaza and the working conditions and workplace concepts over there, we of course have to look into those environments as well to get better working conditions for those people who are in manufacturing fields. So, but we have to limit ourselves to the knowledge work. So what I'm going to talk about is evidence-based why and what. Already gave you an idea about the context of that. I will present three selected topics, and how can you proceed in practice. And the body of this lecture will be part 2 selected topics. Maybe the boring part of the lecture is evidence-based, why and what do we mean, what's the history, and I gave you already some clues about the relationship with evidence-based medicine. But especially for my audience, perhaps a lot of you are working in FM consultancy, what are the benefits of getting involved in evidence-based workplace management, and what are the progresses? Part 2 selected topics, as I said, user productivity and workplace characteristics. I'll give you some updates on that, employee ages and new workplaces. What did we find on that? And I limit myself to number 3, left out number 4 due to time constraints. So unchanging patterns of work, while everyone is talking about disruptive changes in work and work patterns. And the question always is, do we listen to all those gurus talking about those disruptive changes, the journals writing about it, but what are the facts? So I'll give you some clues about the unchanging patterns of work so far. And part 3, how do I get involved in evidence-based workplace management and all those knowledge issues that I will present? How do I stay up to date, and what type of mindset is required? So part 1, what is evidence-based and what's being said, and probably you've seen those books in your bookstore, or you probably read them. On decision making, on chaotic differences, on disorders in society, and sometimes we find ourselves in, especially in the FM discipline, in good company with Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, behavioral economist, very interesting field of studying psychology and economics and how people make decisions. And sometimes we find ourselves among those especially fast decision makers. You know, FM is nothing in terms of cost as compared to HR issues and how much personnel costs, etc. And I'm very much in favor of also thinking slow and getting the right data and getting the right insights, and even if we can't create evidence or full proof, we might at least try to reach something that is more plausible. And the same applies to this pretty new book of Nick Taleb talking about the disorder and the chaotic environments that we are in. Very often FM is a neglected discipline. We find ourselves doing jobs instead of talking to people, deciding about what we do. Both books don't provide us with a lot of FM-like insights, but at least there are some conceptual insights that can help us very much, I would say. So what is, in my definition, evidence-based workplace management? It's about, as I already said, something that like the conscientious, explicit and judicious use of sources of information, in this case 4 sources of information. Don't leave out your practitioner expertise and judgment. Build up in years, go back very much to Dan Kahneman's book with the System 1 and System 2 thinking and decision making. If you don't know the book that I just showed, try to get it from your bookstore. Very interesting, especially in this part. Evidence from local contexts. What do we know from this specific context? What we apply here doesn't mean that it works in other contexts. Critical evaluations of the best available research evidence, which is very much a scientific approach, not very much access in reach of practitioners. However, if you look for those critical evaluations, you certainly find on the internet very readable stuff, and I will show in an instant an example of that. And very much important as well as a source of information, the perspectives of those people who might be affected by the decision. And thanks to Rob Reiner and using his definition of evidence-based management for this purpose. So what it is and what it is not, and I advise you to read this more carefully afterwards. What evidence-based management is and what it is not. And I would suggest here, as I pointed it out in red, it's a way of thinking about how to make decisions, combining rational and those irrational way of decision making. So let's continue with the biggest misconception, simply applying widely used and vaguely approved tools and techniques is the same as doing evidence-based practice, like all those tools that are available on the internet, which is not the case. And we are trying to get insight in all those data sources as I just mentioned them. So it's not those vaguely approved tools. We are really considering reliable and validated tools. So that's the kind of scientific talk. I will not go into statistics very much, but statistics might be interesting, as is your personal judgment, which is very important as well. So here's an example of what we were doing more than 10 years ago, actually 2003. I'm quoting from a publication from our office, a book called Cost and Benefits of Innovative Workplace Design. And we were already looking at that time for what is being written on the effect of physical variables on productivity in more quantitative terms. And as you see red underlined in the table, we found that in an American study where people said the introduction of teleworking increases productivity by 58%, or getting some ergonomic furniture, raising the productivity bar with 21%. And as you can imagine, if we count labor productivity by the amount of days that we work, let's say 5 days a week, then 58% is more than, it's close to 3 days a week that we would get an improvement in our productivity, or increasing or using ergonomic furniture might increase productivity by 20%, which means we are having 1 day extra out of those 5 days because of the furniture. But the problem in all those figures that we tried to find out was the lack of clear descriptions of the types of interventions, the way those percentages were measured. No information about the original situation was provided, so how can you compare the original and the new situation? How do you get to those percentages? And very often still in popular literature or even in professional literature, we see those type of percentages above 10% or 15% still being mentioned there. So here's one of my first advices to you. If you see those percentages of above 10 or 15%, don't believe them. Get into the data or ask the question, how do you know? How did you measure those type of things? What were your definitions? What were your measuring methods? So if productivity raises, we are confronted with very different percentages. When it comes to workplace management and evidence-based workplace management, we've always been forward-thinking and seeing new ways of working more as an evolutionary than a revolutionary process. So it has been here from the 50s and the 60s onward. Early adopters, we see them in government and financial institutions. And as I introduced myself, I already told you about the stories and the lack of data. So that was the start of the Center for People and Buildings, which I'm guiding. 15 years of systematic data collection, case studies, so practice-based, office use and office redesign. We are trying to do some analysis, pattern recognitions, and also are involved in improvement in individual cases. So what are benefits for end user organizations? That is improving, as I introduced it already, the evidence-based practice with conscientious, explicit and use of different sources of information. And to popularize that, and you could also say, do we know and does it matter? Benefits for consultants. Experience is no longer enough as a unique selling point. Taking your responsibility as a professional, you cannot stay with your past experience. You have to move ahead and get more insights to your customer. And you're not paid for the work, but for contribution to increased performance. Actually, that's what I think is what your customer wants. So when assessing workplace strategies, Frank Becker of Cornell University, very famous in the world of workplace research, says, test, don't guess. He recently, a year ago, wrote an article in an issue of Working Place. You can find it back on the internet. Test, don't guess. So now I'm going to the next part, and I look forward to share this part, especially on the issues that I'm talking about, and I introduced them already briefly to you. So let's go to the first one, which is productivity and workplace features. Are those somehow connected? Do workplace features and different or new workplace features, or do they support an increase in productivity? And you meet those people, those CEOs that are optimists and easily say they will raise productivity, those investments in workplaces, and not interested in how the mechanism works, but just sharing with us that there will be an increase in a certain percentage. But the average workplace manager might be an optimist as well and say, I'm going to tell you how. Going back in literature, finding the table that I just showed you, to say, if we are buying new furniture, ergonomic furniture, our productivity will go up by 20%, which is, of course, very, very good news for a CEO, like if it's that. But they have to be really suspicious about those percentages I already explained. And what I would like to argue is that an evidence-based perspective seeks the dialogue. What do we mean by the workplace? What is productivity? Etc. You can read more of those questions here, and I'll go to those perceptions, because we are always in a multi-stakeholder environment in organization. People looking at the image, the innovations in the company, the value day by day of the shares on the stock market, the CFO looking into costs with his internal look into the company, corporate staff looking into how do we get the work organized, how do we get the work done with the workforce that we have. And then the largest part are the employees that are looking for a good job, a nice social environment, healthy work, and being happy in their jobs. The perceptions of productivity can go about, we can talk about labor productivity, we can talk about total factor productivity, and if we dig in those things, we get more idea about what we're really talking about. So if we talk about this evidence-based workplace management related to productivity, my question is always, what type of definition is that you're talking about? And a lot of people talk then easily about labor productivity, but also people are, when you talk deeper, they're talking about the all the input variables and all the resources together, which is more the total factor productivity, and how these resources are interconnected. How is the development of IT connected to young people coming in the office, older employees without the good competences to use those IT. What is the connection with workplaces, whether they are well designed or poorly designed? So when it comes to productivity, we really have to look into those figures. So the figures that I'm showing here are more realistic in terms of the possible increases of productivity, like the 1–2% as coming from those figures. And even the analysis of productivity figures could, as I show you here, could point to inefficient production processes, not just contribution of poorly designed workplaces or FM practices. So it could be also in the organization of how people are working. But again, it is like the percentages in the figures below. Productivity and economic concept, but there is also more. Is it about business continuity? Are we talking about perceptions? Are we talking about alternatives like what do you think about well-being or sustainability as compared to productivity? So the discussion with the board level should be about more about those different things. But what I'm going to talk about is especially perceived productivity, because as we've seen, this is an economic issue, productivity, and since about 12–13 years in Center for People and Buildings, we shifted towards perceived productivity. We want the individual assessment of the individual employee about whether his workplace environment supports his productivity, or whether, when talking about collaboration, the workplace environment supports teamwork or team productivity. And as I already said, when you're digging into the internet with questions about what is available knowledge, I'm quoting here from a newsletter of the Center for Evidence-Based Management, and they gave a short summary of a research project they did, especially on literature on the factors associated with knowledge worker productivity. And they found out of a selection of 500, close to 600 studies, that there were about only 75 studies available that really showed some information. Didn't mean that the rest was useless, but didn't provide a reliable insight. And one of the interesting outcomes was that the physical workplace, as we as facility management or corporate real estate management people are looking at, was not even in the top 3 of variables associated with productivity. Social cohesion, perceived supervisory support, and information sharing are far more important than the physical workplace. If you want to get more about this, I would suggest you that you look up this research in the URL on this page. So what is the influence of facilities experience of employees in office buildings on the perceived labor productivity? That is actually the question that we have been looking at and trying to collect data on, to analyze that, and to provide our clients with evidence about. We use what is called the WODI database. WODI is one of our survey tools, the work environment diagnosis instrument. We have a limited data set, of course, which might also create a limited answer to the question, can I generalize what I'm telling now? No, you cannot generalize it. It's limited to the Netherlands. It's limited to the 120 case studies that are in the database. It's limited to the 20,000 respondents. But at least we are trying to resolve some more insights and issues of how the whole mechanism works in terms of perceived productivity as related to the satisfaction with the facilities, the workplace, the accessibility of it, the characteristics of the workplace, as I showed them here on the left side of the slide. And getting to some results of that, predicting perceived productivity, and I left out the correlation factors, but I showed them with the thickness of the line. So concentration in the workplace, can I concentrate myself, and functionality and comfort of the workspace, I would say the ergonomics of the workplace where I am, are the strongest variables, with the strongest correlation to my individual productivity as I perceive it from an end-user perspective. The individual issue of perspective or of productivity is also related to the number and diversity of the workspaces. Are there rooms for doing concentrated work? Are there breakout rooms for small informal talks with colleagues or with your team? And how about the privacy? So, and again, this is Dutch stuff, so maybe privacy is very much in an individualistic country like the Netherlands an important thing. But these are the design parameters that we find very important for new workplace design, and we've been feeding them back to architects, and we see first type of designs coming now dealing with the outcomes of the research so far. And we see also in the first evaluations of those designs that people appreciate and assess those type of work environments much better than older designs, which I will talk about in an instant. When it comes to employee age in the workplaces, this is an interesting thing in the type of economies that we're living in, where people like myself have to work to 67, 68 years before the retirement. So the question is, what will be the retirement age where they get their pensions for the generation of my children, which are in their early 30s. The development in retirement age, number of pensioners going up, Dutch information again, figures are not very interesting, but the interesting question is what is going to happen after 2015 towards 2020. Will we see the average retirement age going up to 65, from 65 to 67 to 70 years, and are politicians making different choices already, so that the scenario which with the steeper line shown here will be more of the truth, so that we will have much more mixed generations working in offices. And coming to that, I have to say, does the development of office design help us then? We had a design as, let's say, history from cellular offices on the top right, going left in the 60s to the more open landscape type, going back to cellular offices again, and from the 90s on, 2000, 2010, go to more open and non-assigned workplaces, yet finding out that there are pretty much strong disadvantages, seeing people are unable to concentrate, reporting a lack of privacy, etc. So we are now starting to, also based on the research we've done, to more, again, more enclosed offices or mixed offices with still unassigned flexible use of workplaces. So there are new designs coming to the market. The research, the question that we are posing here in the Netherlands is like, what are the perceptions of office layout and use for people in different age groups? With some details about where the research is based on. So the overall results is like, we see that flexible offices with a free non-assigned workstations, we see that especially the younger generation under 40 appreciate those flexible non-assigned workstations, open offices, over the traditional cellular offices. The overall value, pleasant work environment, it's non-discriminate for those younger groups, but at least you see that when people are getting older, they appreciate those cellular offices with their assigned desks over those new type of offices very much. I can go in depth with that on different variables: privacy, opportunities to concentrate, opportunities to communicate. Is there a more concept of remote working allowed, and also teleworking, home working, third places, etc. At least that is appreciated by most of the generations, and the over 60s are pretty indifferent. Still, coming to another general remark with which is about the amount of red squares here in this diagram, showing that the new type of offices show a lower rating over the traditional cellular offices. This is of course a result from the current design, and what we saw here in the Netherlands is that some designs were like copy-pasted from solutions which were with interesting, attractive, fancy designs, but didn't work. Yet organizations paid money for that, introduced it, not knowing what the consequences were. And here are some of the results showing that architects should come to other designs. There are more details, some more indifferences when it comes to the independence of facility services, indoor climate, light, etc. But interesting is that filing, archiving, storage, and acoustics are one of the disadvantages of those new designs, and it shows the shortcomings again of the designs that we've studied so far. And some positive things as well: openness, transparency, very much interested in the interest of the people, appearance of the building, number and diversity of spaces, interior design appearance, very well rated by most of the people in the age groups. But the interesting thing, again, relating age and productivity, is that we see the age groups under 31 to 50 and above 50 years, that the appreciation on a 5-point scale isn't very big. However, if you see that this is a reduction of in the appreciation of the flexible office types with the older generation, a reduction of about 10%. And if you have in your labor demographics, in your organizational demographics, a larger group of above 50, then you might reduce the at least the perceived productivity by 10%. And I think that that cannot be the intent and the objective of management that decided for those type of offices, because that would be penny-wise pound foolish, saving on the square meters but losing money on the productivity of your workforce. So some results: cellular versus flexible and open, mixed results. Privacy, always an issue in all the age groups. Positive on flex, remote working, appearance of building, interior design, diversity of spaces. So these are the strong points. So if you can include them in new designs, that would help very much. When it comes to the aging issues in flex environments or open offices, older people are less satisfied with a number of things: communication, acoustic storage, etc. So could you talk about new ways of working for older people, new ways of working for younger people, as they are prescribed by the design as delivered in organizations? I don't know. We have learned to work in the organization where it's been taught to us. We're not taught to learn how to work at school or at university. We learn it in practice, and to unlearn it, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of cognitive changes of your mindset. So we really have to consider where we are putting the costs in our type of organizations and where we are trying to get the benefits. Again, some comments. It's represent current design practice in the Netherlands, so that creates a bias. It's not the results are not applicable to any other design. However, patterns might be more generalized when we compare the type of research to other environments, other cultures, other countries. What we find very often is that architects and consultants are unaware of the knowledge, which is pretty much an objective of this webinar, to share what is available, especially in a discipline as environmental psychology, is not very well known by architects and consultants. Functional cognitive aging is an issue that happens to each of us, and the results show some correlations. Older employees will stay longer in the office, so we have to pay attention to their needs. Better designed workplaces that incorporate lessons, which can be useful. Job resource, supportive job resource, positive support to people in the organization. So the third issue, and then I'm going to the third part, which is more about how do you dig in, can you get a share in all those knowledge developments. The changing patterns of work, as I was telling you, disruptive changes is what's being told to us. But since the 70s, it's predicted that work at home will increase. So what have we seen so far here, and what happens to those places where people work when we come to talk about new ways of working? Some results. Change of activity patterns. Only let's say some 10 years back, and if you look to the diagram, you hardly see any changes in the activity patterns as we measure them over the past 10 years. Of course, not a guarantee that there will be no changes in the future, but there is no such thing as disruptive changes. There is no such thing as dramatic changes in the way we work. Only a slightly decrease of time spent by people on the telephone from 2006 to 2013. So don't believe, I would say, based on this fact, the people that are saying that there is such a dramatic change in the way we work. Time spent outside the office, increase in opening hours of shops, etc., freedom in working hours leads to marginal changes in office use in general here in the Netherlands. Less time spent in the office leads to lower occupation in the office and allows 4 days work instead of a 5-day week. leads to less use of the office, which is of course common sense, but it is very important to look at the, especially the times and the dates when this type of thing happens, to make a good use and efficient use of this type of knowledge. So is there such an increase of working at home? And we see, especially from the last 7 years, that there is not a very much of an increase in working on other locations or on the road, as you can see from this slide. So the changes in patterns haven't been that disruptive or dramatic. So coming to an end of the webinar so far, so talking about productivity, talking about aging issues, talking about working patterns, how to proceed with this type of issue in practice. As I said throughout this lecture, evidence-based workplace management requires a critical attitude. Do we know? Does it matter? Don't trust the figures as you just read them, and ask yourself, is that so? It requires also dedication. Seek and you will find is from the word, can be applicable to our field as well. Ask questions about context. Read, dig in, and get involved in research and development somehow. In your local university or in international networks, very important for each of us. So this leaves us now for some questions and answers, and I guess, Josh, I leave it to you now to guide it somehow.
Yes. First question is, in the next few years, what way will technology play a part in providing evidence for workplace change?
Thanks, that's a very good question, and technology has been an subject of interest very much especially by productivity economists. And I remember one quote from one of those guys saying, technology, especially information technology, has been everywhere but in the statistics. We reduced or we increased labor productivity in organization by introducing information technology and all kinds of tools. However, those people, typing out our letters 30 years ago have been replaced by big IT departments, by support people, etc. So that's one of the reasons that people are saying IT is everywhere but in the statistics. And this somehow gives me an idea that this will be in the future more of the same. It will increase individual productivity of knowledge workers, but at a company level, I don't think it will increase productivity very much.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question because we're running short on time. While we did not have time to treat other occupations than knowledge workers, can you say a few words on whether evidence-based management is having positive effects in areas of work such as cleaning, security, retail, possibly even teaching young children?
That's a very good question again. In cleaning, it's obvious that technologies have supported people to raise the productivity, but also we are very much aware of the side effects of that. While cleaners are in the office, they interact with the people that are doing their job for, let's say the knowledge workers. So cleaning is not a job, kind of a mechanical manufacturing type of job, but it is treated like that. Cleaning is a very social job. and the end users might not appreciate that the office is not as clean as possible, but when they have been talking with the cleaner about that, then they are neglecting probably that, or they can. So you know, the perception of a job as a kind of a manufacturing job versus a social interactive job is very much when it comes to the progress in terms of productivity. And I haven't seen so much studies, especially not evidence-based, on productivity increases when we talk about cleaning processes as a social interactive job. When it comes to teaching, it is whether it's in primary schools or in higher education, going to university level, etc. It is very hard to define what the productivity is, especially the labor productivity, because it is mainly created by people. So the labor productivity issue is very much important. Same applies to labor productivity, for instance, in caring homes. We did a study about 10 years ago where we found out in literature that, let's say, there is a lot of replacement. For instance, nurses in caring homes for elderly with dementia are replaced by technology, so that especially in the nights, video monitors are applied to keep the people, the patients and the customers at rest, and that they are from a kind of a control room. The nurses are from a control room, controlling whether the things are at ease. But we don't see very much studies with a holistic perspective. The work technology, the social settings with nurses, with family helping in caring homes or in nursing homes. So it is very much important to collect data from a holistic perspective, where all the substitutions are shown, people by technology, or supporting family with the support that usually staff can help. So there is a need to get a more systematic and holistic picture of that.
Excellent. Okay, if you could go to the next slide, Wim.
Let's go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
That's to you again.
Yes, it's mine. And this is just where you can go for upcoming FMCC events. In the next slide. As always, the FMCC does like to let everybody know of the other councils that are out there that you can use as resources, etc. And then last slide. There we go. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today for this World FM special edition webinar. Everyone, you have a great day. Wim, thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you, George, and thank you everyone for listening, and please feel free to be in contact afterwards.